Hey, Big Red, how come I never see any other 3D models like you walking around?
I'm a one-man army. I don't need anybody else.
Yeah, but isn't it nice to have someone to support you?
No 3D model needs support.
That's actually wrong. Most models need supports.
Not if you're doing it right.
Are you saying that I've been 3D printing models wrong this entire time?
I didn't say anything. You did.
Okay, so some really cool stuff is happening right now. And so I wanted to make a video a little bit about what's going on. And kind of to start off with, I got someone to sponsor the channel a little bit by sending us a bunch of filament. And so I'm able to start a project that I've wanted to do for a really, really long time. And as some of you might have guessed, that project is a village. I'm going to 3D print an entire village, and not just like, 4 or 5 houses. We're talking like 10, 20 houses, villages, tavern, all this stuff, wizards tower, all this awesome stuff. And so I'm super looking forward to getting that all printed as soon as that stuff comes here. So this is going to be my part one of kind of creating that village and just kind of the steps that I go through, just in case anyone out there is interested in doing that themselves. Now, part of this goes along with something I started a long time ago, way back when I first started this channel. One of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to create a 4 foot by 4 foot wargaming table, and I wanted to do it super cheap. I always remember going into my local game shop when I was a kid, and they would have those 6-foot tables set up, all ready to play Warhammer on, and I remember thinking they were so cool. And I always wanted one, but it always seemed like something that was way out of my reach. And so I wanted to build one, a 4x4 table for under $20. And so I jumped through a lot of hoops to try and get there. And in the end, it kind of changed, because halfway through it, I decided, well, I want to make my own game. I want to make my own tabletop war game, which I still do. But that's Pulsegate. Pulsegate is the name of that. That's where this channel comes from. And Pulsegate is going to be, a tabletop war game that takes place between 2 worlds. And so the gaming table will basically be split. Half the table will be one world, and the other half will be the other world. They'll be linked by these gates, and that's where the combat kind of happens. And so I stopped making my just single, table and split it in half. And so the goal was originally to have one half of the board be kind of like medieval setting in a fantasy world, and the other half of the board to be current setting, kind of in our world, post-apocalyptic. If you know anything about the lore that I've kind of been putting together for this, that'll make sense. And so I'm also going to use this as an opportunity to finish that board. So yes, I am going to be printing a village. I'm going to have everything for a normal D&D village, but I'm also going to have everything I need to make my 4x4 game board that will be half old world, half new world. And so I hope you stick around to see how that turns out. So first things first, I started putting together some files to print. I had a little leftover filament that I wanted to use before I got all the new stuff, and so I decided to put together a couple buildings, couple things that I wanted for the terrain. And the first thing that I wanted to print is this. This is just a little gazebo. And the way that Pulsegate works is, yes, all terrain is climbable, all terrain is enterable, so you can go inside of here. Obviously you can't get like a whole squad in there, but a sniper inside of here, not a bad idea, right? You can go on top. And as I was putting this together, I came to a realization of a couple things that I wanted to share about supports. If you have the settings on your printer good, you don't need a lot of supports. And now let me kind of rephrase that a little bit. I printed this. This is the base to a water tower. 0 supports. It printed just like this on the plate. As you can see, it has these in between pieces. Are they perfect? No. They're not perfect, but they're pretty close. Supportless. So I mean, these are nice straight lines. If your printer settings are good, you don't need a lot of supports. And why would that concern you? Why does that matter? Well, because supports do two things. They take time and they take filament. So the less of them you have, the faster you're going to print and the more filament that you're going to save. So it's kind of a win-win thing to learn how to print without using supports as much as possible. And again, back to this gazebo. This gazebo's got these little ball things that hang down on the sides, and it's got a lot of stuff that generally would need supports. And the file itself came in this piece and this piece. I printed all of them without supports. Well, that's not true. The roof accidentally had supports, and I wish it hadn't because they were a nightmare to remove, and I was really mad about it. But this one printed with 0 supports. And let's talk about how. Okay, so first things first. When you pull an object into Cura, okay, and you put it on the table, if you look at it from the bottom, it will show you anything in red is something that it thinks needs a support. Okay, and what determines what's in red is, if you come in here and go to your support settings, you have the overhang angle. So it's the minimum angle. So if something has a 50-degree angle, you know, it's going to need a support. If it needs a 70 degree, an 80 degree, a 90 degree, you know, and the higher this goes, the less stuff will need to be supported. But it also comes with the danger of, you know, stuff failing. Now, just by looking at this piece, you can tell a couple things are going to happen. These balls on the outside, these little, like, I'm assuming lights, right? On the outside, they have nothing below them. And so when the printer nozzle gets to this point to print, it's going to move from right here, where everything's nice and supported and good to go. It's going to move out to here and try and put down a layer in the middle of the air. And it can't do that. I mean, obviously there's nowhere for it to go. And so it's just going to keep pushing out filament, and then it'll come back in and it'll just leave, you know, spaghetti strings all over, and just, it won't work out well. Okay. Another thing, as you can see, these things right here, same thing, same story. They don't really have much to go on. And so technically they might need supports. Now, like I said, if your printer is good, a small distance like this coming off of something generally isn't that big of a deal. These windows, you shouldn't need supports on those. If your filament is drooping for something like these windows, then you have some issues. Either your printer is too hot, or you're printing too slow, or your fan speed's too high. Could be a bunch of things. Okay, and we're not going to go into troubleshooting all of those. But for the most part, if you're having issues like that, you need to look into your settings. Now, how do we print this without doing supports all over the place? Well, that's simple. Every Windows computer has this 3D builder on it. And all you have to do is pull an object in here. Okay, and then you just go to edit the object. And what we're going to do is we're going to click on this object and we're going to split it. And then using this little tool, we can tell it if we want to keep both sides, we want to keep the top, we want to keep the bottom. And then using this, we can determine where it's going to be split. And so what I want to do is I want to be able to split this in a way where it will print everything that I want that needs a support. We talked about how these things need a support, so let's move this down just below them. You find the spot. I want it to go above the window because I don't want any of this stuff hanging out. And then you split it. And so now we have these two pieces. Okay, and honestly, simple way to do it, delete one, save this file. Okay, and this is what you're going to print. You're going to print it just like this, just ground up. It's going to print everything that it needs to do. Okay, and then we're going to get rid of the bottom. Same thing, we're going to save this. And then what we're going to do is when we print this, we're going to put it on that build plate, but instead of printing it like this, we're going to rotate it. We're going to flip it upside down on the build plate. And so we're going to import it. It's going to be right here. We're going to rotate it. And that looks like this. So now when we print this object, as you can see, there's almost no red because there's no overhangs. There's no supports needed. And it took just a few seconds to save it this way. And now we can print it. We don't have to deal with the supports. We don't have to tear them off. We don't have to throw them away. We don't have to keep them. We don't have to do anything with them. There's no waste. Now, we're going to have to glue these two pieces together, but that's not hard. And if you do the cut in a good spot, it'll be something that no one will ever notice. So my goal as I start printing this village is to print as many things as I can without supports and see if I can do a truly supportless village. And that's basically what I wanted to share today. I know it's not a huge thing to learn. For most people, they probably already know it, but it's one of those things that I didn't learn for a long time. Getting your settings zeroed in on a printer and on a filament is why it's so important to not change up your filament all the time. Find a brand that you like, get it zeroed in, get it perfect on your printer, and use it all the time. And then you can start printing things and not need those supports, and not need a lot of supports. Okay, I'm optimistic that I'll be able to do a lot of this without supports, but there are parts and things that I think that I'll have to do it on. We'll see. I'm hoping that I can print a ton of these buildings and just tell you how easy each one is and how hard they were, and be able to share this village with you, the painting process of it, just the creation of it in general, as well as the game board that I'm planning on making for Polskate. So if you're interested in any of that, please stick around. Like the channel, subscribe, share your stories with us. Do you use supports? Do you find supports overrated? One of the things, I used to print minis on my FDM printer all the time, and supports were my biggest nightmare. But if I had known then what I know now, and known that my supports were failing, and the problem was I just didn't have my printer zeroed in on that filament, I think things would have went a lot better. And heck, I want to do a video where we print minis on an FDM printer just to see how good a quality we can really get right now. So if that's of interest to you, please stick around. Join us here at Polskate. And if you have any little secrets that you've learned about supports, or you've learned about FDM printing that you wish someone had told you, please tell me. I'm all about getting that information out to whoever I can as quick as I can. So thanks for joining us today, and stick around for part 2 and 3, or however many parts there are, until we get this village done. And as always, don't spend so much time creating your world, your village, that you forget to spend a little time in it. Until next time.